Picture a city, 60,000 people. No electricity, no pumps, no microscope, no idea that germs even exist. It's 1,300 years ago, deep in the rainforest of what's now Guatemala. And someone fills a jar from a reservoir and carries home water that, by the standards we use today, is cleaner than what comes out of the tap in much of the world right now. You've been sold the opposite story your whole life. Ancient people drinking whatever swill they could find, dying young. Dirty water was a great killer, yes, but ancient humans had no clean water is flat wrong. Some absolutely had it. So the real question isn't whether, it's how. How do you get safe water when you can't see the thing that makes water deadly? And no, it isn't just they boiled it. It runs from tunnels under a desert to a detector hiding inside your own face.
Here's the cruel part. Clean water and lethal water look identical. You can't see a bacterium, a virus, a parasite's egg drifting in a glass that looks perfect. The spring that saved you yesterday and the puddle that kills your child next week are the same shade of clear. The danger was invisible, silent, and it rode in on the one substance you physically cannot avoid. And it got worse the moment we stopped wandering and built towns. One family crossing a landscape drinks and walks away from its waste forever. But pack 1,000 people around one water source, drinking, washing, and relieving themselves near the same stream, and you've built a machine that pulls contamination out of the population and feeds it right back in. Civilization came with that loop bolted on.
So humans cheated, and the first cheat wasn't technology, it was knowledge. Long before anyone could say why, people worked out rules that are eerily correct. Spring over pond, moving over still. Draw from the source, not the swamp it drains into. They didn't know warm, stagnant water breeds the microbes that kill you. They just noticed which sources were good and passed the verdict down like an heirloom. But judgment fails when you've got 60,000 people and one dry season. So they built. Around 2,700 years ago, older than the Roman Empire, Persian engineers hunted the water table hidden inside the mountains and hand-dug tunnels for tens of kilometers, sloped so gravity alone walked the water downhill. The qanats. Because the water ran underground, sealed from the sun, it barely evaporated and stayed shielded from the filth above. The oldest at Gonabad still serves tens of thousands of people today.
Rome ran the same play at monstrous scale. Aqueducts, stone rivers marching water in from distant hills. And they weren't naive about quality. They preferred cool mountain springs to the local river and built settling tanks where the water paused so grit could sink out before reaching the city. By the end of the 1st century, a Roman official named Frontinus was put in charge of the water supply and wrote an entire treatise on it. Now, go further back and east to the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa over 4,000 years ago. Hundreds of private wells, bathing platforms, and covered brick drains running along the streets to carry waste away from where people lived and drank. 4,000 years ago, someone designed a whole city around separating clean water from dirty water. The disease loop spotted and cut before anyone knew a pathogen existed. And every one of these people did it blind. Not one could tell you why it worked.
Some went further and treated the water directly. In Indian medical texts written over 2,000 years ago, you find something that reads like an instruction card. Boil it, heat it in the sun, filter it through sand and gravel, strain it through cloth, and store it in copper. Copper! That's not folklore, it's chemistry. Copper is quietly toxic to many of the microbes that sicken us. Modern studies confirm water left in a copper vessel sheds a huge fraction of its bacteria. They had no theory of germs, they just knew copper worked. The Greeks strained and boiled, using a cloth filter bag so tied to the tradition it earned the name the Hippocratic sleeve. The Egyptians let cloudy water stand so sediment fell out, and used alum, a mineral that clumps fine particles together and drags them to the bottom. That's the same basic trick a modern treatment plant still uses today. And now, back to that rainforest city. In 2020, a team led by Kenneth Tankersley at the University of Cincinnati studied the ancient reservoirs of Tikal and published it in the journal Scientific Reports. Layer by layer through the sediment, in one reservoir called Corriental, they found something that shouldn't be there: quartz sand, and a mineral called zeolite, a natural filter microscopically porous that grabs contaminants and microbes and pulls them out of water. It's still used in purification today. Here's the kicker. Zeolite isn't found near Tikal. The nearest source is a rock formation 30 kilometers away where clean, sweet water flows. The Maya went out, found where the water tasted good, worked out the strange mineral was doing something, and hauled it back to build a filter. And it worked. The other reservoirs show contamination, toxic mercury, algal bloom residue. Corriental comes back clean. 2,000 years ago, in the jungle, humans ran a working mineral filtration plant.
And this is the part that stuns me. Nobody was sharing notes. Persians in the desert, the engineers of the Indus, physicians of India and Greece, the Maya in the jungle, oceans and centuries apart, in total isolation, kept arriving at the same conclusion. Water can be tamed. Give humans a deadly water problem and enough time, and somewhere, someone out-engineers it, without ever knowing the enemy's name. But engineering explains the cities. It doesn't explain the lone human. No tunnels, no minerals, no science. Standing at an unfamiliar pool in the wild who somehow gets a flicker of warning. Don't drink that one. That's not knowledge you can build. And to explain it, the story has to stop being about human history at all and become about something far older than any human who ever lived.
Have you ever smelled rain coming? That earthy scent rising off dry ground before a storm? That's not the smell of water. It's a chemical called geosmin, made by bacteria and algae in soil and water. And you can detect it at around 5 parts per trillion. That's a teaspoon dissolved across 200 Olympic swimming pools, and you'd still catch it. Your nose is tuned to this one molecule thousands of times more sharply than a shark can smell blood in the sea. Why build a creature like that? The leading hypothesis, and it is a hypothesis, not settled fact, is that this hypersense is a survival tool for exactly our problem. Geosmin marks water. From far off, it could steer a thirsty ancestor to a source. Up close, it could flag a pool thick with dangerous microbes. Nobody can prove it, but that it's even on the table tells you how deep this runs. You didn't learn to distrust that musty glass. You were born distrusting it, running a program older than our species. So look at the whole shape. On one side, technology. The tunnels, the aqueducts, the copper, the zeolite. On the other, biology. A nose ancient enough to warn a person off bad water before a single word of that knowledge existed. They complete each other. The inherited sense kept individuals alive long enough to notice the patterns. That noticing got built into the reservoirs. Instinct fed the engineering, and the engineering outran the instinct. You're descended from the people who had both. But I'll be straight with you, because this is where a lot of history online goes wrong. Don't walk away thinking ancient humans had clean water solved. They didn't. It was never the default. It was a fragile achievement, brilliant in some places, catastrophic in others. And it didn't stick. When Rome fell, so did its aqueducts, and cities slid back into centuries where filthy water was a mass killer again. The real answer isn't yes or no. It's sometimes, in some places, through genius, and never for granted. Because the real victory is staggeringly recent. For thousands of years, we fought blindfolded, doing the right things without knowing why. The blindfold slipped in 1854 when a London doctor named John Snow traced a cholera outbreak to a single water pump on Broad Street. But defeating it at scale came later still. Deliberately chlorinating a public supply to kill pathogens didn't happen continuously in an American city until 1908 in Jersey City. Typhoid deaths there fell off a cliff. 10,000 years of getting it right in the dark and barely a century of knowing why.
So the next time you twist a handle and clean water simply arrives, no spring to hunt, no tunnel, no copper pot, no boil, no prayer, feel how strange that is and how unfinished. That tap works because an invisible system is maintained every single day. When it fails, the old enemy walks right back in. Even now, the WHO estimates some 2 billion people still lack safely managed drinking water. So if the line between clean and deadly was always this thin, how thin is it now, under the tap you never think about? This was never really a story about the past. It's a fight our species has never finished, and it began long before the first human was ever thirsty.